This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo. This week and next week, we're presenting Koom doing interviews at the recent Toronto Comicon. This week, he talks with Gerhard, who drew environments and backgrounds for Dave Sim's Cerebus. Gerhard discusses working with Dave Sim and his more controversial aspects, and why he took a buyout from Sim, plus the ergonomics of comics creation and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. We'll then get a percentage of what you spend. It costs you nothing extra and helps us cover web hosting and the other costs of presenting this show every week.
Hi, this is Deconstructing Comics with Koom, and it is March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day at the Toronto Comicon. I'm here with Gerhard, who I believe does not have a last name officially. Is that correct?
Officially, no, and it's actually pronounced Gerhard, as in, like, rhymes with Amelia Earhart.
Okay, and do people call you Ger?
People call me Ger, they call me, no, usually Ger. I never liked Gary. The only one that calls me Gary is my mother.
Okay, so, but your name's not Gary.
My name is not Gary, it is Gerhard.
Okay.
As in, Gerhard, clean up your room.
Did you always go by the one name moniker?
As far as comics, my comics career goes, yes.
And, for example, Seth has often said he regrets that. Do you regret it?
No. No, I don't. Actually, pretty much anytime people find out what my real last name is, they completely understand why I just use Gerhard.
Okay, cool. This is one of those times when I wish we could be doing a video podcast instead of a audio one, because Gerhard is
very good.
Is he just said very good? Is catching while we're talking, and he's working on an amazing Regency Hotel-esque background as we talk. So I don't know. Maybe I could take some photos and post them up later. Anyway, so we're here to talk about you and your career and really anything you want to talk about. So let's just start with the beginnings. I believe I read in an interview that you were sketching and drawing from a very early age, and your wife told me that you used to throw out your drawings in high school, and she and her friends would go dumpster diving.
Well, apparently that's what they did, yeah. Yes, in high school I had 3 notebooks. 2 of them were for, like, one would be for math and science and history, the other would be for geography and English and whatever else. And they would have, like, maybe half a dozen blank pages in them. And then I had my 3rd notebook, which was absolutely crammed full of paper, blank pieces of paper, which I would sit down and during class, when I was supposed to be filling those other notebooks, I would fill my sketching notebooks just with doodles and sketches. And when it got full, I would take them all out and I would throw them away, and I would fill them up with blank paper again. And then a little did I know that people were going behind me and fishing out some of their favorite doodles.
So at what point did you realize that you wanted to pursue art in a more serious vein? And from what I understand, you're not formally trained, so how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I'm not formally trained. It's all been trial and error. I probably should have gone on to some sort of art college, and I might have learned things a lot faster than trying to reinvent the wheel myself. But I did not do well in school. It took me 3 times to pass grade 10 art, mainly because the curriculum was divided between drawing and sketching or painting for one part of the year, and then the last part of the year would be ceramics and sculpture, which, let's say, I didn't excel at. And so I just always liked to draw. It's just what I did. And I was hoping that I'd be able to make a living at it someday. But reality being what it is, I ended up doing a lot of really crappy jobs, working in factories and whatever I could to pay the rent. And I slowly worked my way toward the art end of it by, well, for instance, I was working at a factory running a press, just doing menial, repetitive labor. But then when I quit that job, I got my next job running a press was a silk screening press. So that's one step closer to, and I would hang out, I would have my lunch in the art department, in the art room. And I would just use their art supplies to do sketches and stuff. Nice. And then I got a job at
So how old were you?
I would have been early 20s.
Okay.
And then I got a job at the local art supply store. And through that, I met a few people where I actually started getting some commercial artwork, where people would hire me to draw. For instance, my favorite one was she wanted me to draw a frozen beef pie using pointillism, just dots, but make it look delicious. So this is the kind of stuff. I drew a lot of tires,
for flyers
ads.
and
flyers and ads.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who were your influences when you were aspiring to be an artist? Like, if you weren't formally trained, like, how did you develop the unique style, which you seem to have developed at a fairly young age?
That's I think I was around. I don't know how old you are when you're in grade 3, but it was around.
You're about 7.
About 7, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm about 7 years old, and my parents both had to work all the time. They were poor immigrants, and
from Germany.
From Germany, yeah. And so I had a babysitter, and I had a coloring book, but it was to my recollection it was like a paint by numbers coloring book, and I didn't have any crayons. So my babysitter said, well, for the lightest color, where it says, if yellow is number 1, right, just leave that blank, and the next darkest color, just put one set of lines in, and then for the next darkest color, put 2 intersecting set of lines in, right? And I thought she was nuts. But I actually tried it, and lo and behold, the picture formed as if you had used, except it was a black and white picture, right? But the picture formed just as if you had used colored crayons, and I thought, well, isn't that cool? And believe it or not, that's how I started all this cross-hatching, yeah.
But you can't be telling me that it was simply due to a lack of a box of crayons that developed your style. I mean, there must have been other artists that you tried to emulate or things you gravitated towards.
Oh, absolutely. Once I realized that this was a legitimate technique, and it wasn't just because I didn't have any crayons on hand. Then, of course, I started when I started discovering people who knew what they were doing and had done this, especially the old masters hundreds of years ago and whatnot. And
please throw us some names, whoever you were particularly infatuated with.
Oh, actually, my earliest influences as far as art and drawing go, most of it was from Mad Magazine.
Okay.
And I'm just going to blank on everybody's name now anyway. But
sure.
It was, and you know what? I didn't really even pay that much attention to the names. It was the art that interested me, not who drew it.
Right. So you're in your 20s. You're working in the drawing room. You're doing flyers and stuff. And at some point, from what I've read in the interviews, Dave Sim got you to do a Swords of Cerebus story, and he thought you were going to take ages because of your style, but you were able to knock back pages in like a day.
Yeah, it didn't. It wasn't a Swords story. What happened was Archie Goodwin at Epic Magazine,
right
at the time. There he is. Was sorry, I'm looking for my next pen here.
Yeah, no problem. Take your time. Take your time.
Archie Goodwin had approached Dave and asked Dave if he'd be interested in doing some color stories for Epic, just little short color vignettes for Epic Magazine. And Dave wasn't into color. He wasn't a color guy. He is a black and white guy. And at the time, I was doing my commercial art, and I was also had put together some pieces for an art show, like for display. I framed them all up and then would display them and sell a few, and then, display them at the next show and sell a few more. And then whatever hadn't sold was just hanging up in my living room.
Can I ask what your subjects were?
Oh, it was mostly landscapes, still lifes, that sort of thing.
Was it very similar to what you drew for Cerebus?
I was basically doing backgrounds, and that's basically what Dave said. He saw this stuff, and he said, if I laid out the pages and drew the characters and the word balloons, could you do this kind of stuff in behind it? It was like, okay, well, let's give it a try. And so that's where it's the epic story called His First Fifth. And it's the story where the young Cerebus finds half a bottle of booze left on a table in a bar that he's cleaning up. And he sneaks down into the basement with the half bottle. And so that was my very first published comics work, or any work.
Cool. We have some questions from our loyal listeners, so I'll ask one of them now. Paul Spence is really curious and excited to ask you about your working relationship with Dave Sim, and he wants to know about the process. Apologies if you've talked about this before, but he asked, did Dave ever give you completed scripts, or was there some other kind of process? How much involvement did you have in the story or in terms of art? Which was completed first, Dave's characters and maybe foreground or your backgrounds? Could you talk about the process of getting to the finished product?
Sure. Can we take that one at a time? What was the first?
Yeah, sorry about that.
No,
so his first question was, did Dave ever give you any completed scripts?
No. Which also leads into the next part of the question, I think. I had no input into the story except for maybe tangentially, like just by through an offhand comment or through a reaction that I might have to something he had done on the page, may have influenced. He liked to make me laugh. If he could make me laugh out loud by what he had done on the page, then he knew he was on the right track, right? Otherwise, I found out one page at a time, just like everybody else, what was happening next in Cerebus.
So there were no story conferences?
There were no story conferences. When we started on Jacka's story, so I came in with issue 65, which is about halfway through Church and State Volume 1. And like I said, he would, if there was something on the page that needed to be there for story purposes, he would either let me know or he would show me a sketch that he had done in his notebook, and I would take it from there. Otherwise, if there needed to be a door or a window, he would just sort of draw a pencil line and write door or window where it belonged. Somebody's trying to get in this room.
Yeah, let me go see.
Okay,
there's somebody at the door walking over.
Sorry.
Come on in.
Oh,
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, Gerhard's just made a sale.
I've got to make some money here.
And he's going to sign a picture of Falling Water by Frank Lloyd Wright.
Yes.
You wouldn't happen to know where your medals are because he actually...
Oh, they're right there on my corner of the table. They're face down. There's a little pile.
Okay, I'm going to go get one of those then for you to sign as well?
Yeah.
He's a very big fan.
I'm sorry I missed him.
That's okay. Why don't we just leave the door a little open, and then that way you can come in or go out? Or...
Did you want to come out and meet him for just half a
Oh,
second?
yeah,
Can
go.
you do that just
We'll
for half a
pause.
second?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Yeah, I can give him his medal. I have to show you one of these. I'll bring it.
Coming up, the ergonomics of comics creation, why Gerhard took a buyout from Dave Sim, working with Grant Morrison on a series for heavy metal, and more. But first, help Deconstructing Comics, Critiquing Comics, and To the Bat polls move up to bigger and better things. Pledge a few bucks a month via Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. I'm trying to find a way to make podcasting into a career. Your pledges at Patreon can help make it happen, which would free me up to make that much more content. Help us out at patreon.com/deconcomics.
Hi, my name is Billy Hogan, host of the Superman Fan Podcast, which explores the world of Superman and the many creators who have added to his legacy over the decades. Episodes will feature creator biographies or highlight some of their top stories they have created as well as their top characters. Other episodes will feature topics appropriate to the holiday or the time of the year. For instance, Valentine's Day will feature stories about the women in Superman's life. April Fool's Day will feature some of the bizarre Superman Silver Age stories, or some of the imaginary stories that have been published. Halloween will feature some of the scary Superman stories, or some of his strange transformations, and of course, some of the Christmas Superman stories. The website can be found at supermanfanpodcast.mypodcast.com. The blog is supermanfanpodcast.blogspot.com, and you can send email to supermanfanpodcast@gmail.com. I also have a spoiler-free comic book review blog of the titles I read every week, which can be found at mypulllist.blogspot.com, and you can send email about this blog to mypulllist@gmail.com.
Okay, we're back to our interview now. So Gerhard just gave...
Gerhard.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm like kicking myself right now. Gerhard just gave a admirer fan a Cerebus 300 medal, and it's like a little sticker that Gerhard photoshopped that awards people for finishing the whole run. And I was just telling him that I couldn't make it beyond, I think I got to like women or something, and I just found there were certain things I liked, like I liked Melmoth just because I had a thing for Oscar Wilde, and obviously Sim did too. But when I got to those blocks of text, I mean, the pictures were incredible, the art just got better and better, but you know, things were not just, and I couldn't pretend as much as like a certain friend of mine who pushed Cerebus on me liked it. I just couldn't go along and just pretend that this was just a monumental work that I just wasn't smart enough to follow. So, right. I don't know. Do you want to talk to that?
No, I know those giant blocks of text threw a lot of people for a loop. And a lot of people, you know, that's not comics. Giant blocks of text aren't comics. If you want to write a book, go write a book.
And they were rants sometimes. They weren't even books.
Some of them were, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, we were talking about something else
your
before.
Process.
Oh, right. So after Church and State was done, was the first time that we sort of sat down and worked out a few things before we even started on the story. Dave started on the story. I did a whole bunch of what I guess would be called pre-production drawings. I designed Jacka's apartment and Pud's Tavern and the little community there on the side of the hill and all that sort of stuff before we even started on the first issue of the story.
I should interject that from what I've read in the interviews, he never saw you as just a hired hand, but as a collaborator, and you did do a lot of work in terms of defining what those backgrounds were, and sometimes there was even stuff in the foreground, like that sheepdog, for example.
That was much later, right?
Yeah. I mean, like a lot of people, I think, called you an inker, and even Sim took umbrage at that. He was like, no, this guy's an artist in his own right.
Right.
And obviously the issues became much stronger once you came on board. So, that being said, yes, coming back to your project.
Thank you. No, and it was Dave always said that the backgrounds were my domain. I mean, I could put the interior of a submarine in there if I wanted to, but it would look kind of odd.
Right.
The story department was always Dave's. When I got so Dave and I always worked very closely, physically. When I first started there, he was renting office and studio space in this building on Main Street in Kitchener, King Street in Kitchener. And so the office was upstairs and the studio was on the middle floor. and his drawing board was near the window which overlooked King Street, and my drawing board was sort of on the other end of the studio. But we weren't more than, 15, 20 feet apart. And then later, when we got our own building, when we bought a little house, because they tore our other building down, again, he was working in what used to be the living room, and I was working in what used to be the dining room. So we worked fairly closely. And what Dave would do is he had 20 nails in the wall with those little bulldog clips on them. And when he was done a page, he would hang the page up on the bulldog clip on the wall. And what I would do is take the page down from the bulldog clip and take it into my area, and I would sit there and stare at it for as long as it took. Sometimes it'd be like half an hour, 45 minutes, just sitting there staring, and which I'm sure drove Dave crazy, because he's like, this is a monthly book. We got a schedule to maintain here. What's he doing? He's just sitting there. But I would sit there and I would look at what Dave had done. So when I got the pages, the panel borders were on, the characters were all fully inked, the word balloons and sound effects all fully inked, but basically just standing around on a white piece of paper. So I would have to put them in context, and the first thing I would do is look at what Dave had done and where his light source was coming from and where the horizon line would be and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I would sit there and just work it all out in my head, or at least get a good idea of where I was going with it in my head before I even put pencil to paper. And the other thing was, we had to average, to stay on a monthly schedule, a page and a half a day. So not only did have to figure out light sources and perspective and horizon lines, but I also had to figure out how to get it done by lunch.
Right. So did just the efficiency of putting out that monthly book kind of circumvent irritations? Because working in that close a space day in and day out with anybody, let alone somebody with a stronger personality as Dave Sim, right, could be trying. So did you have any tricks to just kind of get the work done as efficiently as possible with as little interpersonal fuss as possible?
Yeah, we actually we worked very quietly. There was no music in the studio. All you heard was pen and pencil on paper, and the rustling of paper, and the occasional grind of the pencil sharpener. And because we were self-publishing, we also had to run the business. So there would be some discussions about business things. The other thing too, the phone would ring, and we'd always take turns answering the phone. And we wouldn't stop drawing. You just pick up the phone, you put it on your shoulder, and you keep drawing. And then you just... Kind of like what you're doing now. Kind of like what I'm doing now, that's right. Boy, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Uh-huh. And and then we would jot notes down in the margin of the pages. If you see some of the original art pages, they've got, phone numbers and notes, like a shipment got damaged, in shipping or whatever, and I would write down the pertinent information on the margin of the page I was working on at the time.
Cool. That actually leads to a couple of questions I have, which is, how do you specifically... You talked about how you keep up your schedule, but how do you physically keep up with the demands of the job? How do you keep from sprains or arthritic knuckles, which would be induced by your work, not necessarily by age? How do you deal with the repetition of much of what you specifically had to draw?
Yeah, that's a good one, because I did have a bad case. I think it's called bursitis on my elbow. I had a sack of fluid dangling from my elbow.
I have that, and it's from writing. It's from the typing.
Yeah. I have a very bad back. I discovered something very late in life, sitting hunched over a drawing board for the past 40 years or whatever. When you're drawing, you're not looking directly down at the pen, because you have to see the tip of the pen or the pencil, so you're always leaning slightly or tilting your head slightly to the left for a right-handed person. When I finally went to a chiropractor It turns out I was standing something like 5 or 7 pounds heavier on my left foot than my right, or something like that. I was all out of whack. I've had stomach troubles as long as I can remember. And the one time when I went into the doctor, he's giving me a bit of a physical, and he looks, I've got my shirt off, and he's standing behind me, and he said, "You ever consider going to a chiropractor?" So, like, he could see that my spine was that out of whack. So I finally went to a chiropractor, and it was amazing. I mean, when I got back into the car, I had to readjust the mirror and the seat and stuff. It's like, I swear I was an inch taller, and at 6'4", that's not necessarily something you want to be. But it definitely made a huge impact, and I do find myself, I have to stop myself and get up and stretch, do something, right? Because I will literally just sit there for hours and hours and hours, and I'll just do this one more, I'll just finish this bit here, I'll just get this panel done, and then before you know it, another 6 hours have gone by, and my back is locked up into, But as far as my hand goes, I hold the pen and pencil very loosely. There's very little strain so far, God willing, knock on wood, all that stuff, that that there's anything. It's my back and my neck.
I hear you. So many of your problems kind of echo mine. Chiropractor is good, but I found I ultimately had to go to physio. I don't know.
Yeah. So physio involving like an actual
posture correction.
Right.
I've had the traction, but to me that doesn't work so much as the isometric exercises.
Right. Actually, my last little trip to the chiropractor, they had a standing desk, like
I've heard those are great.
Yeah, it was electric too. You could it had preset memory heights and stuff, but all I needed to tilt as well. I can't have it just flat. So I'm actually going to look into seeing if he can. Because they were all just custom made right there nearby.
If you can afford the electric desk, you can put some sort of a little mini lectern on it. It's not going to be at any more than one angle,
right? But
it could solve your problem.
Right? Yeah, something like that. I think I'm going to definitely look into that. Yeah, it's a little expensive, but I mean, we're talking about my back here.
I know nothing about medicine or art, but I'm dispensing advice freely.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So getting to
So how's that look?
That is gorgeous.
Okay, cool.
I will take a photo later.
I'm gonna sign that.
Done. It's a deal. Right. Yeah. It's a Gerhard background on a Brian. Oh, I'm
like the air that you breathe.
I'm so sorry.
Do you want me to just sign right under Brian's name?
Yeah, and you can sign it to Koom, please.
Oh.
Yeah. Because I bought that from somebody else.
Right. Oh, to Jim.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, so Gerhard's just on a background to a Brian Bolland headshot.
So I'll just put Koom down here. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Let me sure I spell this right.
K-O-O-M.
Yeah.
K-O-O-M.
Simple enough.
Yeah. Did you know at the time that you'd be working with somebody that would be one of the most notorious figures in alternative comics and the history of comics? Did you know that you'd play a part in that story?
Oh, no. You mean when I first started?
Yeah, in the first few years, I guess.
Okay. For the first few months, let's say no. But it didn't take much longer than for me to realize that Dave was a very unique individual, and that this was something unusual. I had no idea where it was going.
Of course. And there's, I'm not saying this is my view, but just in preparing for this interview, I was reading some stuff online, and there's been two camps of people who've commented. One group has said that they don't like the fact that you stayed till the end, given Dave's views and
Paul's. Left on principle.
That you should have left on principle. Whereas the other camp says, well, he decided on that trip to Gainesville, Florida, that he's going to stick it out to 300.
That's the story.
And so, do you want to talk about how did you start to realize that Dave's work was particularly political, was particularly polemical, and how did you reconcile whatever that it is that you felt? I don't know what you felt with the way those threads were going in the book.
Well, I knew there'd be a certain level of animosity, I guess, or whatever, that being associated with Dave in that way would probably not. I don't know, but it never occurred to me to just leave on that account, though. I mean, he was it was always his book. It was always his story.
Right.
And I was there helping with the art, right? It didn't really... and I don't think he did or said anything that was that horrible that I felt that I should have to leave on principle. And I did agree to do 300 issues, and that's what I was there to do, is to finish those. I didn't necessarily agree with a lot of what he said, but that doesn't affect how I did my job. Yeah. And it was my job. I remember I got a call from a police officer one day. Dave wasn't in the studio. He must have been out at a signing or something. But there was some police officer somewhere in Canada, and I guess some teenager had got into trouble, and he had a collection of Cerebus books in his room or whatever, and his parents, I guess, had said that the problem with this kid is that he's reading all this mind-altering literature, right? And the policeman, was asking about this mind-altering literature, and I just told him, I said, well, isn't that what literature's supposed to do?
And it's hardly Robert Crumb.
Right.
I mean, it's like John Lee Hinckley.
But, these dangerous ideas, all these, but I mean, but that's what literature is for, is to change your mind in some way, right?
Yeah.
You either learn something, or you learn a different point of view anyway, or something. Like, otherwise it's not literature, it's just crap, right?
Are you a big film fan?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I like Paul Schrader. He's made some good stuff. He's made some bad stuff. But he wrote Taxi Driver, but he made his own film.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so when Hinckley tried to shoot Reagan because he wanted to impress Jodie Foster,
right,
the FBI came to him and said, "Have you ever do you know anything about this?" And then he said, he was in Toronto once and talking. He said that Hinckley had sent him this really long letter. This is way before email, of course. Right, going on about Taxi Driver and whatever, but he knew that if he'd said to the FBI that he'd gone this letter, he'd be in there forever.
Yeah,
so he said, "I never heard
of it." Yeah. Wow. Yeah. See, in today's day and age too, you got to be so careful about what you say, right? And so,
I think during the 80s, there certainly was a conscientious thing about women's lib, but now the comics field has become different.
Right.
And so things that once I took at face value or whatever are being reassessed continuously, and I think that's going to haunt Sim beyond the legacy of the fact that he came out with 300 issues or that he had a vision or whatever. I mean, also, I don't know that vision necessarily was able to carry the book for 300 issues either.
Right.
Some of his difficulties, which were maybe not even just psychological, but were, I've heard he's got schizophrenia and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. I don't really want to get into all that because, yes, a lot of people have heard he has schizophrenia, right? I don't think he's ever been diagnosed as schizophrenic, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So let's not.
And even if he has been, he wouldn't accept that diagnosis anyway.
Of course, of course, and and some of the strongest personalities in history we suspect
exactly
have traces of that.
Well, what do they say? That the difference between being a genius and insane is how much money you make.
Yeah, that's really good. I don't know if I buy that, but you can have a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B.
Right.
But obviously it didn't get in the work of you, you were able to very professionally separate your duties from whatever Dave was going through, and I just find that amazing. I mean, obviously your professionalism to a great degree helped that along or balanced it out.
Right, yeah. Well, to me it was always a job. We both treated it as a job. Well, as far as the production of the book goes, for Dave, he lived and breathed and ate and slept Cerebus. It was a 24-hour a day. But for me, I would go in there, try to get in there by 9 o'clock, and I would be out by 6. Right? And sometimes I'd have to take pages home with me, or I would stay a little later because I'd spent too much time drawing too many little tiny lines all day long. And but it was treated as a job.
Right. And to be fair, I think he really did respect what you brought to the table, and he knew that the book was better for it. And but as you mentioned, you didn't know what was going to come down the pipes.
Yeah, because, I mean, don't get me wrong, it did get very difficult near the end there, and I almost didn't make it. There were a couple times where it was like, I broke out in shingles, too. That was another good indicator of stress.
Mm-hmm. Then I gotta ask you, do you ever stop and say, I could have not done this, I regret this, or is it just too much a part of your life and what your life became to be able to make that kind of...
Well, and plus it was getting so close. Issue 300 wasn't that far away anymore, right? It was just a matter of getting over that hump.
You could see the light at the end of tunnel.
Yeah, and especially once Latter Days was done, that book with all the teeny tiny type about the Cerebus's take on the Book of Genesis or whatever. Once that was over and we were into the final 12 issues of The Last Day, and we had this mantra, done by Christmas, done by Christmas, done by Christmas. I remember reading that.
I was just curious about photocopying, just because I came across that you discussed in an interview, that sometimes you draw like a master shot, mm-hmm. and then you would reproduce parts of it and then maybe fine-tune the inking.
Yep.
So how much photocopying was done?
That's tough to qualify or quantify. It depends on the page, right? It depends on we used it a lot in the form and void part of the story, because they wanted it set up that way, where there'd be one big master shot that you would just take little pieces of, right? And you wouldn't see the master shot until at the end. You would see the little pieces first and then see where it all came from, right? So basically what I did was I would draw the master shot, but I wouldn't put all the fine inking in it. It would just be the outlines. So that way I could blow it up or shrink it down, and those lines wouldn't break up or fill in. And I would add the cross-hatching to the photocopy, right? And then I'd finish the master drawing with all the photocopy at that scale. That way the drawing can be enlarged or shrunk down, but the cross-hatching stays the same scale.
Gotcha.
For lack of a better word.
Got you. So there's a weird kind of subtle continuity between panels.
Right.
How did you deal with what could potentially be extremely boring, i.e. doing the same images, backgrounds with a slight shift in orientation again and again and again? Did you find some kind of Zen method in the madness?
All that cross-hatching takes very much a Zen method. Yeah, you just sort of put your mind in neutral, and it's amazing the things that you think about while you're not thinking about drawing, right? And it's funny though, looking back at if I look back at the trade paperbacks or at some of the original art that might come up, and you think that the page might remind me of something, what happened that day, or even what happened that week or that year, or not a thing. The page, there's very few pages that actually have a memory associated with them.
Right. Interesting. Joe Cabrera asks, he says he's very curious about Dave Sim buying you out. How do you feel about that?
How do I feel about it?
Well, yeah, that's his question. I guess, are you happy?
It was a business arrangement. I was vice president of Aardvark Vanaheim. Dave was the president. I was a 40% shareholder. When it became very obvious to me that Dave was going in a direction. This was after the book was done, and we had wrapped up a few loose ends, and we were trying to basically figure out what we were going to do next.
So was this like a good 10, 12 years ago?
This was 2007, I think.
Oh, only about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And it just became obvious that Dave was very much going to do his own thing without too much regard as to like general business practices, and that as I said, so anyway, no, it was a business arrangement.
Let me just take a look at the time. We'll wrap up in can we say 15 minutes?
So right at 9?
Yeah, is that okay?
Oh yeah, are you going to start packing up then?
Is that
There's just somebody who has some books for you to sign, but I think I can give them 12 on. So
why don't you go do that? Yeah. Take a break.
He's just not here tomorrow.
Take a break. Take a break.
No.
Take a break. I'll just pause.
Books. Oh, right. Like you might be silver.
Oh, covers and stuff.
Yeah, like your actual Cerebus.
Sorry, let's get to. So we were talking about how you felt about him buying you out, and you're saying it's your idea.
It was my idea. I wanted to leave. It was obvious Dave was doing his thing without much regard for how it affected the business.
Yeah.
So as a business partner, I decided this was not the good place for me to be anymore.
Sure.
And I gave him a proposal as to a buyout, and he accepted it, and that's all there is to it.
Okay, so we better bring you up to what you're doing now. So for what I understand, you're doing the commissions and you're doing the heavy metal story with Grant Morrison, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So I'm going to ask you about each of those in turn. Just about the commissions, by the way, they're gorgeous.
Thank you.
And I saw a comment that John Byrne said where he's pretty much subsisting off commissions. He's not really doing much. And he's saying, I'm making more money doing the commissions than I would get doing page rates for. Do you feel the same way, or do you miss doing a comic that sees publication?
I make more money doing commissions at conventions than I'm getting as my page rate for the heavy metal.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I'm doing these pages for heavy metal because A, it's Grant Morrison, and B, it's heavy metal. When I was a teenager, there were 3 magazines that I bought: National Lampoon for humor, Omni magazine for science and science fiction, and Heavy Metal for all the weird stuff. Right.
Cool.
So
tell us about this heavy weird story you're doing for.
It's based on Louis Wayne, which is or the world that Louis Wayne created. He was an artist in the early 1900s who did anthropomorphic cats doing people things, and it was just wildly popular. Nobody ever seen anything like it, but back then. And so he created this whole Pussland, Catland, but he also went a little loopy later and ended up in an insane asylum. And Grant took that premise, that world that Louis Wayne created, his Catland, and it's fallen into this dystopian world because it is the creator's gone mad. So this is the starting point. Although you don't know that when you're reading the story, you don't really know that Louis Wayne is involved, but that is the basis of the root of Grant's inspiration, I guess. He did it. He actually wrote it a long time ago. It was supposed to be originally a radio play.
I heard that.
And I guess he just never got around to getting it drawn. Jeff Krelitz, I believe it's pronounced. He's the co-CEO of Heavy Metal. He approached me at a convention last year and said that Grant was looking for somebody to draw this story, and they want to get just the right person. They were thinking of Brian Talbot. And went, ooh, Brian Talbot, he'd be good, right?
There's a similarity between you two. Yeah, I see that.
But Brian was busy, so they wanted to know if I'd be interested. And I said, well, sure, I'll be interested. And I said, well, can you submit a sample page, And they sent me 3 pages of the script and said, pick a page and lay it out, and finish it up and send it in. And because I guess Grant was being real particular about, what he wanted. And so I read the 3 pages, and I thought, shit, I don't know which one of these 3 pages I want to do. So I roughed them all in, right? And I scanned them in, and I emailed them, and I said, which page do you want me to finish, right? And they emailed back a couple of days later and said, and you've got the job.
Awesome.
So that was cool.
So obviously there's a few things that are different. For one thing, you're doing all of the art as opposed to collaborating. But what's it like working with Morrison? Or are you simply just working off a script? Is there no back and forth, no virtual back and forth online?
It's working off of scripts, but I've never worked off of scripts before.
Yeah.
Dave, like I say, Dave was in charge of the story. I got the characters already on the page.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other people's scripts are like, but reading his, I don't know how to say this. It's like he's there. Like the scripts are very descriptive. There's not a whole lot of dialogue in them. They're mostly description, and it's all background stuff. And it's like, I don't know. You can almost hear his voice, and he's very enthusiastic about it, and where he wants the focus to be just by how much detail he'll put into a certain area, and he'll give you the background on stuff and what it is he's looking for. But he also says, if you have a better idea, you go for it, right? Here's what I suggest for a layout or whatever. But if you find something else works better, so there's a lot of leeway there. And so far, anyway, anytime I've turned in pages, about the only feedback is that the cat pages look fantastic.
That's funny because that's what people say about Alan Moore.
Yeah, I think it might be a very similar, sort of experience.
It's interesting that the second artist you worked with in your career, the second comics, creator you worked in your career, also is known for being a notorious personality.
Right. I know. I see. Yeah. I don't know what
you're drawn to them. You're like one of those good girls who's drawn to bad boys.
That must be it.
Okay, I got one question from a listener, which you might enjoy. He says, "Who are your 5 favorite inkers?" And once again, Gerhard is not an inker, but who are your Patrick Ijima Washburn asks, "Who are your 5 favorite comics history inkers in comics?"
Oh, see, there you go. You're going to make me name names again.
How about just one?
Bernie Wrightson.
Okay.
Hey. And again, I'll look at this stuff and I'll go, oh my God, I love that stuff. And then I'll look at the name and you think the name stays with me. And I don't want to malign anybody by leaving them out, right?
Okay,
there are so many fantastic inkers that are way better than me out there that I'm just jealous and I'm never drawing again. That's it.
This man is a gifted star. There's no question about it. Can I ask you one final question that's kind of a joke question?
Okay.
Have you ever played the game Fuck, Marry, Kill?
No.
Okay, so usually somebody gives you like 3 celebrity names and you say, which one would you fuck, which one would you marry, and which one would you kill? I'm going to give you 3 notoriously big personalities from the 80s in comics, and you can professionally talk about fuck, marry, kill. If you dare.
I'm not sure I understand the rules of the game here, but...
Okay, let's give it a try.
Okay,
so I'll give you... from the 80s, John Byrne, Howard Chaykin, and Dave Sim. Which one would you fuck? Which one would you marry? And which one would you kill?
You realize they're all men, right?
Yeah, so we're going to have to talk about this professionally as opposed to sexually.
Oh, I see. Okay. John Byrne,
Howard Chaykin, and Dave Sim. So which one would you want to live for the rest of your life professionally?
Right.
Which one would you want to have a one-night stand with professionally? And which one would you just want to kill?
Oh, okay. I warned you I might play this card at the beginning of the interview, and now I'm going to play it.
Okay.
No comment.
Gerhard, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Gerhard's site is gerhardart.com. You can write us at mail@deconstructingcomics.com or look up Deconstructing Comics on Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. All our social media links can be found on the right sidebar at deconstructingcomics.com. Also, please give us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Our theme is from bensound.com. Last Thursday on To the Bat Polls, Lorenzo Semple's final Batman teleplay, The Joker's Last Laugh and The Joker's Epitaph. Does it stand up to Semple's other Bat scripts? Look up To the Bat Polls wherever you find your podcasts or at tothebatpolls.libsyn.com. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and Mulele and I will critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. Watch for Critiquing Comics this Thursday right here in this podcast feed. Next week, Koom interviews Peter Bagg on stage at Toronto Comicon. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.